This is our final session for Rest is Resistance, and we wanted to give you all a recording so that you don't lose the information. You can access this whenever you would like. And today's session is all about action steps. We wrapped up the book last session, and this session, we really wanted to focus on giving you all the tools that you might need to share this information with others. So our agenda is that we're doing our welcome. We're going to review our community agreements. We're not going to do a pre-work discussion, but we will do a recap of session 3. And then Maddie will be introducing us to design justice and its 10 principles. And we will not be having a break. And then I'll be connecting design justice and revolutionary rest. And we're going to end with a wrap up. And we will not be doing the meditation, but yeah, we'll do a quick wrap up with some reflecting questions. So our community agreements, what's shared in this recording stays in the recording. Take the learning, leave the story. That's basically what it is. We're listening to understand, not to respond. And we should be willing to speak a draft. And so you'll be hearing plenty of my drafts today. Yeah.
Our drafts.
Our drafts. Yep. So for a quick recap of session 3, we discussed collective liberation and slow revolution. And so we discussed the connections between dream space and collective liberation and how that kind of leads to a slower revolution, because a lot of what we're talking about here is a mindset shift, and that takes time. That takes conversations, that takes connecting with others, which unfortunately can't be done in this really quick time frame that we would like it to be. We had some really great discussions surrounding routine and how a lot now with like self-care culture, routines have become more and more popular, and they're lovely. We as humans, as animals, we love routine. And if we really take a step back and look at it and look at what we're prioritizing in our routines as a society, it's work. We're centering work. We're centering the capitalist system. And then we had some discussions about how this decentering process and this kind of liberating process of reclaiming rest in our bodies, there's this kind of ethical tug of war of like, this is a process that takes a lot of time, and there's a need for action immediately sometimes. Sometimes actions are urgent. And so we kind of spoke to what are our forms of revolution and revolting going to be, because sometimes it does need to be active and it is urgent, but there are certain areas where we can take our time and we can be slower, and changing to a culture of rest is going to be one of those slower movements. Did I miss anything, Maddie, for session 3?
That sounds lovely. Thank you.
Perfect. So our workshop outcomes, we are going to explore the meaning of design justice. We're going to understand the 10 principles of design justice. We're going to connect the concepts of revolutionary rest and design justice. And then we're going to reflect on the last 4 sessions and our biggest takeaways that we got from Rest is Resistance. Now I'll turn it over to Maddie.
Yes, thank you, Priya. It was a lovely introduction, and I hope that our workshop outcomes, at whatever capacity, whatever point you may be watching this video and this recording, that you are able to take away some of the discussions, conversations, and key concepts that we're working together today. For today, and introducing the action steps, we wanted to lead off with a discussion of, based on the conversations that we've had and previous sessions surrounding rest, the accessibility of rest, and really grappling with the ideas of rest not being this equitable thing. based on these conversations, what do you feel needs to change for rest to be accepted, acknowledged, and prioritized?
Yeah, I love this question because um there's so many different things and there's so many layers to what needs to be changed when it comes to rest. Um and I like how you broke it down into accepted, acknowledged, and prioritized because like to be accepted and to be acknowledged are such mindset shifts. It's changing cultural norms. Um, and for it to be prioritized, that's a very like political kind
Yeah,
of change that needs to happen. Um, and so yeah, it's like we need to attack both an ideology and we need to attack how capitalism has kind of kept us in this.
yeah. I appreciate you recognizing the difference between these three facets, like accepted, acknowledged, and prioritized, that it's one step further, seemingly, each time, that to know it's there is not the same as to place it and its importance. And I found in facilitating our sessions together with Equity Labs and Equity Reads, especially, that it seems a common theme for things to be really great in theory, but how do you get there? How do you change a system? How do these larger things at play change and shift? And it was really a conversation of what do we need to do? What needs to change for these shifts? Even if it's a small jumping point, what is the first thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, in recognition of that discussion and talking about those shifts and those changes, it leads to design justice. We know as it stands, the way that humans approach design in any sense, whether it's individual, communal, policy level, it's not equitable. Design justice is necessary to better ensuring the outcomes of decisions and how decisions are made are not marginally or radically better for certain people over others. Design justice ensures that all people are considered within this. And in its core definition of design justice, Hersey states that design justice rethinks design process centers people who are normally marginalized by design and uses collaborative, creative practices to address the deepest challenges our communities face. Design justice in its core works to ensure that the outcomes are equitable for all. So you may be asking, how do the design justice principles connect, especially those two? Uh-oh. There we go. If you want to click through all of them.
Oh,
Um, especially the design justice principles in theory, how do they connect to rest? My cohort Priya here will later design and show us how the design justice principles connect to rest. But for this first part, I'll take some time to talk about what the design justice principles are in explanation and in action. There are 10 principles, and each are incredibly important, and I'll go through and read them as well as give a little bit of a background on them. So principle 1, we use design to sustain, heal, and empower our communities as well as seek liberation from exploitative and oppressive systems. We are healing in these systems, and we are giving people the tools and input of communities to expand out of exploitation and seek liberation. Principle 2, we center the voices of those who are directly impacted by the outcomes of this design. Oftentimes, even well-intended peoples and nonprofits and organizations go in with the intent of good and doing well, but the center of who has a voice is often not the community who they are trying to serve. Principle 2 negates this idea that in every instance where you're going in and changing systems, the most important voices to hear are the people of which who will have the greatest impact. Principle 3, we prioritize design's impact on the community over the intentions of the designer. This kind of relates to principle 2, and that the prioritizing is on the community, and the impact of that will be made is recognized. Principle 4, we view the change as an emergent from an accountable, accessible, and collaborative process rather than a point to the end of a process. So we're not trying to get to a goal. We're not getting to a point. We're not getting to this end idea of like, oh, we made it and now we can stop. This is a constant process. It's ever developing and it's always changing and adapting. And the needs of people's communities and those served will always and forever adapt with that. And therefore, it's not a set endpoint of which services end. Principle 5, we see the role of the designer as a facilitator rather than an expert. We are going in, and in these instances where people are going into communities, we are not the experts. We are a co-collaborator, we're a facilitator, we're a helper. And knowing that communities have this inherent, and the communities that we're working with have this inherent wisdom and have this innate knowledge that is equally important to that of us as a facilitator is crucial to a design. Principle 6, we believe that everyone is an expert based on their own lived experience and that we all have unique and brilliant contributions to bring to the design process. Principle 7, we share design knowledge and tools with our communities. Principle 8, we work towards sustainable, community-led, and controlled outcomes. These outcomes are collaborative. It's not one decision made by one community or group. It's all collaborative, all together, and all in at the table. Principle 9, we work towards non-exploitative solutions that reconnect us to the earth and to each other. Principle 10, before seeking new design solutions, we work for what is already working at the community level. We honor and uplift traditional, indigenous, and local knowledge and practices. We're not going in these instances to say what's broken or what needs to be fixed. In these scenarios where you may be working with a community or a people or a person, finding what's already working, growing on strengths, and honoring the knowledge and innate strength that is there is crucial and paramount. You may be wondering why the design justice principles and why are they important, especially in the context of equity reads in this final session. And we really wanted to, in our development, Priya and I chose to include the design justice principles because design justice is not something that you have to do if you're only working with a community or if you're only working for an organization. These are principles that you can administer into your life doing any sort of work, any sort of role, any sort of impact. And it starts there. Even implementing some of these design principles into your daily routine or your individual routine is something that starts a pattern of design justice that can echo out into a larger sphere. Well, in a perfect world, all of these 10 principles would be acknowledged, accepted, and used. We understand that it is hard to administer all of them at once, and that slowly working up in this idea of a slow revolution and implementing some of these principles at a slow pace is crucial to making design justice as an individual in our individual routines and expanding that into larger communities and hopefully policies. So as a wrap-up conclusion, before we head into what would be our break, I'm going to ask Priya and Linda to consider and just think about. There's no answer. This is just a reflective question and personal reflection for y'all to sit with while we move forward in our session. But what is the point of using rest as a form of resistance, especially in recognition of design justice principles and how you can use those in this resistance?
Absolutely. Um, So I feel like the purpose of using rest as resistance um, is not to simply just revolt for the sake of it. It's about how we're reclaiming our autonomy and we're reclaiming our ownership over our own bodies. It's how rest will allow us to kind of recenter ourselves and what we need versus what the needs of corporations are. And the reason why we wanted to pose this question in between um, the principles of design justice and then actually applying design thinking to rest as resistance is because um, so sorry is because as we like prime our brains for thinking further into um how we can actually implement this, because we can talk it to death about how we deserve rest and how it's our right, but it's being treated like it's a privilege because it is a privilege, right now in the ways that the systems are, it's a privilege. But as we think about design justice and we engage in design thinking for justice, it's important to remind ourselves that what is the point? And then also to reconnect with that point and remind ourselves that though the intention and the purpose is important, just like Maddie said, and just like one of the principles of design justice said, community and impact are at the center of this process, which makes it justice work. Um, and so that brings me to the 6 steps of design thinking. Um, this is these are the 6 steps laid out, and I kind of wanted to talk through what this means for us in rest as resistance and then also just in general. Good to know, a good process to learn about. Um, so the first step is we're going to gauge the general understanding of society regarding the situation. So in our case, as we spoke about in the first and second sessions, the general consensus surrounding rest is that it is a luxury and a privilege, and that when most of us sit and think about it, um, there's kind of a mutual understanding that that's a ridiculous notion. Um, and so we've identified the problem. Yes, we've identified the problem, which is the second step. We've identified that rest is inaccessible. And what makes it inaccessible is because of capitalism. There's an idea that you have to work hard to achieve, but when achievement is designed and defined by oppressive and capitalist systems, the definition will always be tied to money. Um, Rest is inaccessible because for our capitalist society to function, um, we have to keep working and keep producing. And if we never rest or have time for meaningful and intentional rest, we won't ever question what we're doing, why we're doing this in the first place. The kind of system we never question the systems that we're living in. Um, the third step is to ideate on a solution or multiple solutions. And so the key word for this step is ideate, allowing your mind to wander, to go to extremes of whether a solution is going to be so rebellious and revolutionary, or if it's going to be so menial that it feels like you're not making a difference, but you know it is. Allowing your mind to dream up different ideas, even if they feel ridiculous. And then while you're doing that, you can emphasize and underline what's realistic for you. Um, and then this brings us to the fourth step, which is prototyping and evaluating the solution. This is where we can kind of figure out the application of our ideas. This is where we can create new systems, new methods, theories, ideologies, and we can evaluate them, whether or not they're feasible, whether or not they're accessible, if they make sense. Who is it centering? Who is it not centering? All of these questions need to be considered and answered in the process of prototyping and evaluating the solution, because in order for us to get to something that's going to create tangible, actual change, we have to consider what the strengths are and the weaknesses and who it's serving and who it isn't. And once we come up with something that feels feasible, we go to the fifth step, which is testing the solution. You can run focus groups. You can call your friends and you can ask them to try these solutions with you. We kind of did this during our time here at Equity Reads, where while Maddie, Linda, and I were creating our assignment menu, we really wanted to focus on homework not really being homework, it being practice, it being rest itself. And so the final solution is then marketing and distributing the product, or in this case, it's more likely going to be a process. And that kind of that leads me to, I have a question. What do you all think are some ways that we can use design thinking to bring revolutionary rest into our lives? And I would challenge you to especially think about this in like a workplace setting. And if it helps, I'm happy to kind of give my ideas for what I thought for this.
I'd love to hear a couple of your ideas.
Of course, I got you. So what I was thinking is, even in like just the simple interviewing process, while if you are looking for a job, if you're seeking employment from someone, an important conversation to have would be work-life balance, and specifically what the company values, what the team lead values in an individual to be able to fulfill their work. So asking if you notice that someone who's working under you is exhausted, like what is the culture? What is the culture surrounding that? If you are hiring, if you are a team lead, it can be you even creating that space to allow people to rest and making that apparent and intentional.
Yeah,
Was that helpful?
absolutely. I appreciate the ways of putting it into the employer role and how even saying nothing, small actions can make it so that rest is accessible and accepted. Even without saying words at all, you can make these small changes that make it so clear that rest is not only accepted, but also prioritized, and emotional well-being and body is recognized of all people who show up and work for whatever the role is.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking too, in the spirit of slow revolution, how normalizing a fluid pace or a fluid agenda also helps us be okay with not moving on because it's time to move on. We need to slow down, spend time with the concept, give room and space for dialogue, and recognizing that as a point of learning. That makes such a big difference. And I think one of the strongest disruptors I've seen in terms of design justice is being okay with the pace and the timing of things going however they need to go, rather than bullet point by bullet point moving through quickly. And capitalism sure loves to go fast, right? So that is tough to disrupt, but absolutely makes a difference.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you shared that, Linda, because it reminded me of just, it was one of the design justice principles. Where is it? Prioritizing the impact over the intentions of the designer. It reminded me of like to not like marry yourself to one solution, to not marry yourself to this one idea when we're doing design thinking, and specifically in this justice oriented sense, where the product or like the solution isn't the center. It is it's a tool. It's a tool for liberation. Yeah. Thank you for that. Would anyone else like to add anything before I move forward?
I can add a little bit.
Please.
So we used to do this activity around design thinking with students, and we would pose the question of, if you could redesign your lunchroom, because we always did this with students who, like school-aged students, what would you do? Like, how would you redesign the lunch experience? And it was really cool because it was never about a one-dimensional solution. There were so many times that students were like so deeply creative about how do we make a lunchroom, how do we make the physical space so that no one feels left out? They were thinking about what kinds of foods were offered based on where they lived. There was often there's going to be a table where no peanuts are allowed, like we plugged into allergies and things like that. And so it was just really incredible to see how this idea of design thinking and that students, without being prompted, were sort of leveraging the ideas of design justice in their ideas and in their sort of meaning making around it. So I just, as a side note, I think it's utilizing this design thinking and sort of mapping design justice on top of it can be such a can just create three dimensions out of something that feels one-dimensional sometimes.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing, Ashley.
Yeah.
Kids are just so wonderful for so many reasons, but giving them a task like that, making them critically think in that way, always, always, always makes me learn something new. Like, yeah, because kids say the most out-of-pocket things, which is so normal and natural, but then they're also little geniuses, honestly. They kind of remind you of like, oh, we're literally just here. And I love that especially too, because like one of the principals said, we're not looking to create solutions out of thin air, asking the community, asking kids what makes sense to them. Sometimes they have the simplest, most accessible and easiest solutions that we don't even think about because we've got so many other things on our minds. So I love that, bringing community in the process. It's not just one person coming up with these solutions. Okay, now I will pass it on to Maddie.
Thank you, Priya. It has been beautiful to wrap this session up and to work in collaboration with Priya and all of y'all to do an action steps to what rest as resistance can look like in action. To wrap up the session, we have talked a little bit about the design justice principles, gone through them, and kind of connected the dots between design justice principles, what it looks like as a slow revolution in implementing these slowly over time to create this large trickle of change in hopefully what is larger systems, policies, and legislation, and definitely workplaces and individuals, as well as connecting these dots to the 6 design thinking strategies that were beautifully laid out by Priya, and how we can work through the steps and make sure to ensure the people who are being served and the ways that we are acting and resisting are working. To wrap up this session, we kind of wanted to end with, are there any lingering questions, feelings, or thoughts that you may have about this session before we move into our final debrief for today?
Did you see my oops
I
from the
did.
slide too quickly?
Fast.
I would just love to say thank you to Priya, Maddie, and Linda for all their preparation and hard work as we launched, and they facilitated these sessions with you all. We really appreciate their attention and their hard work on this. Each of them brings their own expertise into the conversation. So round of applause for Priya, Maddie, and Linda. And we would love to stay in touch with you all so you can anticipate hearing from us after this final session, and just hoping that you'll stay plugged in with Equity Labs through our newsletter. We have additional community hours that are open to the public that we offer, and there will be another equity read session next year. So we would love for you to stay in touch with us, and you're part of our community now. So we're here to support you, and we appreciate you all very much.
As far as a final debrief and moving forward post this session and onward, having read Rest is Resistance and attending these sessions with us, we would love to know and hopefully hear from y'all about what is one thing you want to take away from these sessions. I know for me, it's knowing when to slow down, and allowing myself the opportunity to slow down. It's something that I've worked on much of my master's and still will continue to work on post now graduation and moving into whatever is post graduation.
A long, successful career. One thing that I want to take away from these sessions is communicating that I'm prioritizing rest. I think that I'm pretty good at doing that internally, where I've like, okay, no, I deserve this moment to myself. But to be able to share and to set expectations, to set boundaries, both for myself and for the people around me, I think the best way that I can resist using rest is to be able to communicate it and to be able to like just firmly stand on it, very similarly to how I would my other values. I've just never thought of it before as a value until now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think something that I would take away is just kind of deprogramming the idea of earning rest. I think that that's still very much something that I'm working on. And so I think it's just continuing to do that and offering space for others to do that. Especially when folks apologize or feel compelled to apologize for taking time or taking rest, just being open to that and saying, you do not have to apologize for taking care of yourself. As Equity Labs or as Ashley, I'm here to support you, and I would rather you take care of yourself than than meet this deadline. So I think it's that deprogramming is probably what I'll take away.
Thank you.
Definitely. For me, I'm thinking too about anytime I'm in a position of power, not just in a hierarchical sense, but in a collective sense too, to normalize rest and to normalize folks defining and engaging rest in ways that fit for them, right? And so trusting that if someone needs to get something done in order to rest, that's what fits for them. But then also normalizing that people have the agency to rest in whatever way they need to. And that can be tough because sometimes there are policies and practices in place that prevent us from doing that. And I think that the more that we can be proactive in communicating it, I appreciate communication as a note here, especially from a position of power, the better that we can make it more part of our culture, right? If the reason we succumb to capitalism is because we're socialized into it, well, then the desocialization also will take lots of time. And so anytime you can disrupt it from a position of power, I think that the more progress we'll see over time.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. As far as participants in Equity Reads who couldn't attend, we would love to hear from y'all about what some of these takeaways may be for you. As Ashley said, we are in a community now, and I really am very grateful for having y'all as part of a community and creating this community with us that is so beautifully surrounded around love and rest as a form of resistance and an action that we can take to preserve ourselves in a world where it isn't meant or built for us to prioritize ourselves. But moving forward into our closing, well, for the next session, never. Our post workshop topic for next week, nothing. And our post assignments, we wrote none unless you want to. We do hope that the menu, which Priya, Linda, and Chandu and I could not attend. Chandu, thank you for his help on this reads. We really did build the pre-work menu so that it's something that hopefully will be used in future workshop sessions, and hopefully is something that we continue all to use in action and prioritizing space for our collective rest.
Linda added, continue to rest unapologetically. And I think that that's a perfect way to close this off.
Yeah.
So, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.